It says, let me inherit a double portion of your spirit, Elisha told Elijah. Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit. Have you guys ever asked for something and then you got it and you were like, Or you asked for something and you got it and it wasn't like as cool as you thought it was gonna be? Or even worse, you beg for a puppy and then you get it and you're like, oh my gosh, it's chewing up all of my left shoes. It's pottying everywhere, and then it grows up and I have to pull it out of a window, right? Like, you didn't realize that what you asked for was going to cost you so much and all of this sacrifice, and then you regret that you asked for it. And there's this moment that we're gonna look at tonight at the very end of Elijah's story, where Elisha asks for something, and when he gets it, he's like, oh man, this is not what I thought it was going to be. A couple years ago, I have this really bad habit. I get out of my car and I don't like to leave stuff in my car, so then I just set it in my garage. So a couple of months go by, and then there's the 87 cups and tacos from Jack in the Box, those wrappers and jackets and shoes and all of those things in my garage. And I was just like, man, I really need to be better at being an adult. So I'm gonna call my friend Leah over, and Leah is super organized. If you're like me, you need a friend like Leah. Leah owns a label maker. You know what I mean? You know those type of people? No, none of you, any of your moms own a label maker? Okay. So I called Leah and I said, hey, what are you doing on Saturday? And she was like, I don't know. And I said, I've got a really big surprise for you. I would love for you to help me organize my garage. And she was like, oh my gosh, we don't have to wait until Saturday. I will come over right now. Like, this is her dream. So she comes over with her label maker and boxes and containers, and I'm like, I just was gonna throw all of my cups away and stuff. And she's like, no, I already made this plan. She made a spreadsheet. And she was like, okay, we're gonna do all of this stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So we get to cleaning, and she was serious about this. I'm like, okay, I'll be right back. And she's like, where are you going? And I said, I have to use the restroom. She's like, that's not in my spreadsheet. And I'm like, no, I really gotta use the restroom. And she said, okay, well, just hurry. And so I run in, and as soon as I get inside the house, I hear this blood-curdling scream from my son, Jax. He's screaming, ah! And I'm like, oh my gosh, did the label maker take his eye out? And I run out into the garage, and I'm like, what is going on? And he's like, I saw a giant rat. And his hands were like this big. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I reach over, and because I'm in my messy garage, right next to me was a plastic baseball bat. I'm like, where exactly did you see it? When you're holding a bat, you have to walk like this, by the way. And I'm like, where did you see it? And at this point, now Leah's over in the corner, and she, side note, loves labels, terrified of mice. And she's standing in the corner like this, and I've got the bat, and I'm like, where did you see this giant rat? And he said, right over there. And he pointed to where Leah was. And so I don't know how you react in fear, but what she does is just runs in place and screams. Anyone? So she just starts running in place screaming, ah! And from between her legs comes this tiny little mouse that is doing the same thing as her, just That's how mice scream. And he's looking me in the eyes. I'm in the middle of the garage with my baseball bat, and now he's running at me. She's screaming. He's coming at me. His eyes were like this big, even though he was that big. And this is what I do when I'm afraid. If I'm driving, I like to close my eyes if I get real scared. I wouldn't suggest it, but if I'm on a bridge and a semi is passing, I'm like, but when I am not in the car, I will run. So I took off running in my garage. So I had maybe 4 or 5 feet. And as soon as I get to the edge, I try to stop, but I'm wearing socks and gray sweats. This will be important later on. And I begin to slide like a baseball player. I just slid into first base, super awesome, skirt, boom. I hit the wall, but it wasn't the wall. I hear this loud clang, and I look up, and this giant ladder I had. Why do I own a giant ladder? I don't know. And it just starts to timber towards me, and I'm like, no. And I look, and the mouse is still It was my slow-mo of it. And I'm like, no, back and forth. And what do I do when I'm like afraid and I can't move? I just closed my eyes. You've been listening. I closed my eyes, and guys, a miracle happened that day in my garage. I caught the ladder. I was like, awesome. And I look, second miracle, the mouse was just gone. I'm like, where did he go? And Leah's still like, in the corner, like screaming. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I set the ladder back up. And all of a sudden, I remembered that I had to pee super bad. And my gray sweats just turned dark gray. And Leah's like, are you peeing? And I'm telling you this because I embarrassed my dog last night and told you his problem. I'm grown at this point, standing here, just looking at myself, just watching it happen. And I'm like, oh my gosh. It was very warm, you're right, you've done this before. At this point, my son goes and picks up the bat, and he's like, Mom, and he's like 7 at this point. He said, I am so ashamed of you. He like points the bat at me. I'm so embarrassed right now. And he opens the garage door, I don't know why, and he goes inside, and I'm like, well, what are we gonna do now? And she's like, you know what, this wasn't in my spreadsheet, so I think we should just go eat tacos from Jack in the Box, right? Because whenever you're super stressed, like you just need to eat in that moment. But do you ever, I think for me, sometimes, the way that I felt in that garage, like I thought we were just gonna clean and organize, and the next thing I know, a ladder and a mouse are trying to kill me, and then I'm standing in a puddle of pee, and I just feel complete chaos. And for many of you, when you go back home after this week of camp, and your camp high turns into life low, you're going to feel exactly the way that I felt in that garage that day. Hopefully, not exactly the way that I felt. But you're gonna feel this moment of like tension and chaos and stress and like, what is happening? And that's exactly where we found Elijah last night, in this cave, alone, and in this moment of like, this isn't what I expected, this isn't what I asked for. And now, tonight, we're gonna read the end of the story. After he's passed the cloak on to Elisha, and they did these incredible things, we're gonna find Elisha in the same place, where he feels scared and there's chaos, and he's not sure what to do with it because it's not what he asked for. So now, Elisha has inherited more than just the cloak and the calling. He's now the proud owner of this chaos. So let me read to you. This is in 2 Kings, verse 2. Chapter 2, verse 11. It says, as they were walking along and talking, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha saw this and cried out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. And Elisha saw him no more. Then he took a hold of his garment and tore it in two. Elisha then picked up Elijah's cloak that had fallen from him and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. He took the cloak that had fallen from Elijah and struck the water with it. What we see here is God's kingdom work continuing. What we see here is this great exchange. And Elisha got more than he asked for, but exactly what he asked for at the same time, but it didn't feel the way he expected it. The only person he had left was Elijah, and now Elijah's gone. But he received the double portion. This is the great exchange. What happened was all of the power that Elijah had and the call that Elijah had on his life and the cloak was now passed on to Elisha. If you keep reading this story, Elisha does everything that God called Elijah to do. He lived out his legacy. This was a great exchange. And what you need to hear tonight is that you are a part of the great exchange. Being a Christian, being a Christ follower, coming to camp like this, it's all very similar to this moment that Elijah and Elisha has. But instead of taking it from Elijah, we are literally taking these things from the kingdom and bringing them down to earth, and we're living them out. And this is the place where we have an opportunity and an obligation to pass those very things on to people, to be a part of this great exchange. So what are you receiving from Jesus? Is it forgiveness? Give that away. Is it grace? Give that away. Peace, give it away. Joy, give it away. Healing, give it away. Any of these things that you receive, it is your job to give those things away. So the reason why camp is so incredible, and I always tell my students, have a camp high. Get all of those things from camp. Get community and friendships and get full of the Spirit and get t-shirts and stickers and bed bugs or whatever it is. And whenever you come home, then give that away. You fill up with those things. I remember a time when I was too full. Have you ever eaten too much? You ever eaten too much? I was in second grade, and I have an older brother, and my job as a little sister was to be the queen pest. And my brother loved Lucky Charms. Now, I don't have anything against Lucky Charms, but I really only prefer the marshmallows, not the cardboard that they put inside with the marshmallows. So one morning, I got up extra early on a Saturday, and I went and I crawled up and I got the Lucky Charms. And I'm really serious about germs, guys. I'm a real clean freak. So I dumped it out on the kitchen floor. Yes, I dumped it out, and then I decided to just separate all of the little cardboard pieces. They're not really cardboard, but they taste like it. And all of the marshmallows. And I, clean freak, so then I just took them up off the floor with my hands that I hadn't washed, and I put them back in the box, and I shut the box up because I would never want them to get stale. And then I put it back in the pantry, and then I leaned back down, and I put all of those marshmallows in my shirt, and I went to the living room, and I watched Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and ate every one of those marshmallows, you guys. Every one of them. Yes, thank you. I know. Yeah. You can clap for that. Clap for Jesus too, but you can clap for that because it was a big moment in my life. I got down to the very last marshmallow. It was my favorite one. I grew up in the 80s. There were only 4 marshmallows at that time. When the purple one came out, our minds were blown. The last one was my favorite. It was a little yellow moon. And I don't know why I did this. Ooh, I know. I don't know why I did this. I looked at it and I thought, I'm going to swallow this one. So I swallowed the little marshmallow, and I'm just hanging out watching my show, and my brother wakes up, and he's like, hey, nerd, and I'm like, hey, I love you. Cannot wait. I'm on pins and needles, and I hear him pour some cereal, and he's like, what? And I hear more and more, and he's like, there's no marshmallows. What is going on? What? I just hear more and more, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is the best day of my life. I had not lived like a real exciting life up until this point. And then I hear my mom come in the kitchen, and she's like, what are you yelling about? And he's like, there are no marshmallows in this box. Now, here's something interesting. The difference in being a child and an adult is not a whole lot, honestly, but there's a big thing. Adults know when they're about to throw up. Or maybe even you, hopefully in middle school. You're like, my stomach feels weird. My throat's kind of closing up. I think I should go to the toilet. Or at least me in second grade had no idea. I was just like, stomach feels weird. I think I'm gonna take off running to the kitchen. So I run into the kitchen and I'm like, what's going on? Blah. You guys, you have never seen such beautiful throw up in your life. Like, if unicorns are real, if they are real and they vomit, I know exactly what it looks like. And I just throw up. I'm like, And my mom's a nurse, by the way. And in the most like gangster nurse, she just bends down and examines my vomit. And right in the middle of it was that stinking yellow moon that I swallowed. Gosh. She goes, are you kidding me? And I'm like, and she's like, you're gonna clean this up. So I clean it up, and she comes into my room. I'm crying. She's like, what were you thinking? She made me use my allowance to buy my brother a new box of Lucky Charms. How rude. Now you guys know why I am the way that I am. I was raised that way. But what I learned that day, and you probably already know this, is what goes in must come out. And that is so true about camp. I don't know what you're receiving this week. Hopefully it's not just drama and like, oh, I hope this boy likes me and all of those things, or I hope this girl likes me, or it's like new friends or old friends or like breakups. I hope that you are receiving incredible kingdom things. Listen, guys, because what you receive this week will come out next week. What you're receiving, whether it's joy or forgiveness or friendships or community or peace and mercy and grace, all of these kingdom things that you're receiving, it's inevitable that they will eventually come out whenever reality hits. When you go home to your family, or you go home to your friends or your enemies, whatever it is that you soaked up this week, that's what will come out of you next week. And you have this opportunity as Christ followers to be soaking up Jesus. There might be people around you who aren't even looking for him, and they get to experience him because that's what you're full of. And that's your opportunity. But we can get ourselves in this situation as Christians where we can be a little selfish or irresponsible. So I have an uncle, his name is Clarence. He lives on a farm, because if your name is Clarence, you have to live on a farm. And Clarence has a bunch of chickens. And I went to his house one day, and he said, hey, I want to give you all of these eggs. And I said, no, I'm about to travel a whole bunch. It's in the summer. Like, I'm not going to be home. I don't really want any eggs. And he said, no, I'm going to give them to you. And I'm like, I literally, I don't want the eggs. That's so kind of you. And he starts putting all of these eggs just in a box. Who does that? Clarence does. And he hands them to me, and he's like, well, just be a good neighbor, like Jesus or whatever. Go give the eggs away. And I'm like, that'll be fun. Just, hey, my uncle's name is Clarence, and he told me to give you these eggs. So I was like, okay, you know what? Actually, this will be cool. I have some friends, like one friend, and I have neighbors, so I'm going to give them these eggs. Just put it in my vehicle. And I forgot about the eggs for maybe like 3 or 4 weeks in July, until I threw my backpack in the back of my Jeep, and I hear this really weird sound. I'm like, what was that sound? So I get out and I go to the back and I open the trunk and I pull the box towards me, and you guys, full of baby chicks. I'm just kidding. It doesn't work that way. He said, what? It does not work that way. You guys are from the city. Doesn't work that way. What? No. I got you. Oh, that was funny. Thank you. Yes. The joke worked. I'm going to tell my friend about that one, my one friend. You know what was in the box? It wasn't baby chicks. It was not one chicken. Doesn't work that way either. It was rotten eggs. And here's what you need to know. I don't have a sense of smell. You can ask me 80 questions about that later. Yes, I can taste. I have a tongue. I don't know what happened. You can ask God. I've never been able to smell, so no, I don't care, because I'm always around a bunch of teenagers, and I hear they don't smell so well. So I can't smell. But when I pull that box towards me, my eyes start burning, and I get this really gross taste in my mouth, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I did this. I'm never telling anyone about this until I tell hundreds of people about this. And I go and I throw it away, and I pick my boys up from school, and they're like, I smell rotten eggs. And I'm like, no, you don't. That's you. That's just you. You smell bad. I don't know how smells work. I thought when you removed the item that smelled bad out of the place, that then it stopped smelling. I had to get my car professionally cleaned, because weeks would go by and someone would get in and be like, I smell, and I'm like, no, you don't. I don't smell anything. But you know what? I went back and I told Clarence, I was super ashamed. I said, Clarence, I have to tell you something. Remember those eggs that you forced me to take, and I was going to be a really good Christian and give them away to my neighbors and my friends? I actually left them in my car, and they turned into baby chicks. And they was rotten, and my car smelled bad. And he said, you are so irresponsible. And I was like, thank you. That's so nice of you. That's not the first time I've heard that. He said, that's disgusting. And I said, I know. And I think that when we keep all of these kingdom things, that when you just receive forgiveness from Jesus and you're not willing to give it away to someone, or when you receive grace and you're not willing to give that away, or peace or joy or community or any of these things, I think that you're irresponsible. And I think that that's kind of disgusting because you're just wasting it. And it's just rotting. And what's the point? What's the point of coming to camp this week and going home and this not continuing? What's the point of that? God's kingdom work is to be continued. And it's to be continued through you. You are the one. You are what continues it. So everything that you've received this week, take that home with you and give that to people who need it, even if it's just one person. We have to understand that kingdom work and Jesus, that they go hand in hand. And when you have an experience with Jesus that changes you, take that out to the world and let them experience that and watch it change them. That's how you get to be a part of this whole big process. You're God's big marketing plan. Watch. Like a good neighbor. Look! I was so glad. As I started to sing that, I'm like, wait, do they have that in Washington? Thank goodness. Listen, what God has created in you is better than any marketing plan like that. He knew that what he started at camp would continue on just like that song does. You just have to hear the beginning of it, and then you know the rest. You're his marketing plan. You get to go home and tell people about him and show them what it feels like to be free. You get to forgive people who don't deserve it. You get to give grace when you shouldn't, because that's what Jesus did for you. So God's kingdom work is to be continued, and it's going to be continued through you and what you've done and what you will continue to do. So what I want to do is I want to pray for you. But while I'm praying for you, instead of just closing your eyes and like wondering what you're going to do tonight, I want you to pray for just one person that you believe needs to receive the things that you've received from Jesus. One person that needs to receive forgiveness or joy or peace or whatever it is. So as I pray for you, you pray for just one person. One person that next week when you go home, that you're going to allow the kingdom work to continue through you to them. And I hope that this week that you understand that you have a cloak and that cloak is to be passed on. Who is your Elijah? Who are you following? And who is your Elisha? Who can you pass these things on to? That's what I want you to pray for as I'm praying for you. Pray for that one person, that Elisha.